Welcome to the shop, my friend. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video, I've got a follow-up to the insanely detailed Boba Fett blaster that I put out, Boba Fett's pistol. Now, just like the blaster, this is completely handmade. I'm not using any 3D printers or laser cutters, and I'm doing that to show you if you take the time, you've got the dedication, you can build amazing looking props with your hands. I know, it's absolutely insane. Now, this particular pistol is made completely out of my HD foam and some wooden dowels, so it's extremely lightweight, and more importantly, it is completely con safe. Now, of course, the thing that sets it apart here is the paint job. And just like the blaster, I went over multiple techniques in this particular video to show you how to achieve all of these subtle details that really make this pistol come to life. So if you'd like to build your own, I have free PDF files available over on my website that you can download to build right along with me. So I want to show you what it takes to put together Boba Fett's pistol and paint it. Let's go ahead and get started. Taking the template that I'd made in Photoshop, I'm going to start by creating the main body of the blaster using a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. Using a sanding sponge, I buffed the surface of the PVC pipe. This is going to make the foam adhere better. Going back to my template, I cut away the parts that I don't need, leaving the main body of the grip. This piece is going to be transferred onto some 10mm HD foam. Once the piece is cut out, the PVC pipe is marked, and then super glue is used to adhere it into place. For the main wrap on the handle, I'm going to be using some 6mm foam. This foam is marked and cut out larger than necessary, and what that's going to do is give us a seamless look as it wraps around both sides. At this point, weldwood contact cement is applied to one side of the blaster frame. After that adhered, super glue is put around the perimeter, and then the two pieces of foam can be firmly pressed together. To figure out where the adhesive is going to go on the opposite side, I apply some contact cement. While it's still wet, I wrap the foam around, giving me an impression of exactly where the adhesive goes. From here, I can mark the basic shape with my pencil and then just apply the rest of the glue. Now at this point, I have a lot of excess foam, but some of this needs to come together at the back and the front of the pipe. Using a smooth sanding drum on my Dremel rotary tool, I can now refine the foam to take it down to the 10mm grip that I made earlier. Versus cutting everything to fit, this process is a lot easier to make sure that everything lines up properly. To fill the hole at the back of the pistol, I'm going to mark and cut a 20mm HD foam round dowel. This dowel is glued into place and then sanded flush with the back of the pistol. Using a scrap piece of 4mm foam, I can figure out exactly how much I'm going to need to wrap around the front of the barrel. This foam is cut to fit, and just like the back half, super glue and contact cement are both used to adhere it to the pipe. Now you just want to make sure that this seam is somewhat flush. Most of it's going to be covered up with a detail piece later on. The trigger template can now be traced onto some 10mm foam. And using a Forstner bit on my drill, I can make a hole at the front of the trigger. The trigger is now glued to the main body of the pistol. Now if you notice on this pistol, I have a couple of gaps, and that's because even when I build, everything's not always perfect. But foam is super easy to work with. Now what I like to do is add more foam than necessary, and then I can use my sanding drum or sanding sponges to knock it down to make everything flush. Now the transitions here aren't perfect, so I'm using some DAP concrete filler. In the past I've used Quick Seal, but this is easily becoming my favorite seam filler because I can wet sand it once dry and it's fully paintable. Plus, since it's light gray, it looks great with my foam. So I let the concrete filler cure for about a day, and now I'm going to use some 600 grit sandpaper to wet sand the surface. Now you want to be careful not take off too much and have a really light touch, but as you can see, the results here turned out great. To make this detail block under the barrel, refer back to my template. I'm going to take parts A and B and transfer both of these onto 6mm foam 2 times. Part C and Part D are cut out of 4mm foam. Now I can glue together the 2 Part C pieces with the Part D in between. The 2 Part B pieces can be glued together. This stack and the front detail are going to be sandwiched in between the 2 pieces of Part A. Now this entire foam stack is going to go underneath the barrel, but you can see how the 2 sides need to be tapered. This is also going to give me the opportunity to flatten the bottom and the back. So I took my rotary tool and I angled the 2 sides, and now this entire piece can be glued to the bottom of the barrel. To make all the barrels, I'm going to be using various sizes of wooden dowels. Detail reference points are marked on a 1-inch dowel, and it can be cut down using a handsaw. A small groove is etched all the way around using a pin file, and I use my sanding drum to bevel the top. To remove the material on the side of the barrel, I use a flat file. Now while this handmade process may not be perfect, it's a lot more fun than just hitting print. Next, a 1/2-inch dowel is going to protrude from this detail piece, so I need to find the center. A punch is used so my 1/2 inch Forstner bit doesn't stray, and now I can remove just enough material for the 1/2 inch dowel to sit within this detail properly. With that complete, the detail section can now be glued to the front of the blaster. The barrel at the very front is going to be made out of a 5/8 inch poplar dowel. Just like before, a pin file is used to sand in a detail line, and then this can be cut to length. Finding the center, a Forstner bit is once again used to drill out the front of the barrel. The 1/2 inch dowel is adhered to the back of this piece, and then the entire assembly can be glued into place. The top barrel starts at a 5/8 dowel, but then bevels down to meet up with a 1/2 inch. The excess material is sanded away with my rotary tool, a file, and a sanding sponge. Once the 1/2 inch barrel had been cut to length, the Forstner bit is once again used to drill it out. This dowel needs to be cut at an angle, so referencing the template, it's cut, sanded, and then matched to fit. With that complete, the two barrel sections can now be glued together. Now I'm going to take part E, and I'm going to transfer that onto some 2mm foam. This piece is slightly going to be glued onto the lower detail, and then wrap around the top of the barrel. To make the support stock, I'm going to start by gluing a piece of 6mm and 10mm foam together. This will give me the correct thickness, and now I can transfer part F onto the stacked foam. A Forstner bit is again used to drill out the foam to make way for the barrel. Part F can now be cut out and cleaned up with my rotary tool. A little bit of heat is used to seal the foam, and you can see how this piece will support the upper barrel. Part F is marked on the side of the pistol, but before it's glued into place, a small strip of 2mm foam will detail either side. Super glue is added and part F can be pressed into place. Now before the upper barrel can be glued in, a small circle needs to be cut out of 2mm foam. This small detail will go near the front and will line up with where the two lower barrels meet. To support the connection of the two barrels at the front, I'm going to start by cutting a small square out of styrene. Once glued into place, this little bit of plastic will give just enough support. A 1-2-3 block is used to make sure everything lines up just right, and then the front and the back of the upper barrel can be glued into place. Using my template, I cut a strip of 2mm foam, which is going to act as the wrap for this section. I utilize a tongue depressor to make sure that all the angles I'm gluing in on the foam are really sharp. As a final detail, a small circle of foam is cut out and then glued to either side. If you all have not purchased a set of punches for your foam, I highly recommend it. Now I could have made the knob out of dowels or foam, but I have these 1/2 inch wood buttons that are going to work great. For the screw on the side, I scored it and used a punch to simulate an indentation. For the wood on the grip, I cut out the center of the template and I transfer that onto some 2mm foam. This can be cut out along with the circle on the bottom and then glued onto the side of the pistol. For the circular detail at the bottom, I decided once again to use my Forstner bit on a wooden dowel. Now I could have made this section out of foam as well, but I'm having a lot of fun working with the mixed media on this build. The wooden details are glued to either side, and then a small foam detail is placed right in the center. This process works so well that I did the same thing using a smaller dowel for the housing on the opposite side of the pistol. Now I can start fabricating the scope on the top. I start by drilling out a 5/8 dowel and then cutting it to fit. A smaller dowel was then cut, sanded, and inserted inside the hole that I had drilled out. The same process was also done with a 1/4 inch dowel to replicate the small light at the end of the scope. Like the front of the barrel, some 3/4 inch dowel was tapered to match the 5/8 piece. This could then be glued to the piece that was already fabricated, and a small foam circle was glued to match the template. For the largest section, 3/4 inch dowel was drilled out and then glued on to the tapered piece. This entire assembly could then be glued to the top of part F. At this time I noticed there was a large screw detail at the back of the pistol, so I start by making the screw head out of some 2mm foam. These sections were glued together and then I cut another circle of the same diameter out of 4mm foam. Now unfortunately it's inset, so I had to drill out the back of the pistol that I'd made look so nice and smooth earlier on. To simulate a wood grain on the handles, I'm once again going to be using my wire brushes. Battle damage and additional striations on the wood grain handles are achieved using the edge of a stone bit. The clasp on the opposite side of the pistol needs to protrude a little bit more, so I punch out a small foam circle. Then using the end of a pin, I can make it look as though it's a recessed rivet. Another foam circle is also used for this lower detail. At this time I noticed on the Hot Toys figure there's supposed to be an additional circle in the handle. So like a lot of the other details, I drilled out and cut down a wooden dowel. I could then drill out the handle and insert the wooden dowel detail into the grip. And with this last step complete, that will do it for fabrication. Even though it's freezing here in the Midwest, I'm going to prime this piece using some Plasti Dip. And I make sure to warm up the can first before I spray it onto the piece. For a base coat on the metallics, I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum Flat Soft Iron. Like Boba Fett's blaster, I'm going to be doing a layer of graphite powder on top of this metallic spray paint. This process is going to fill in a lot of the pores on the foam and the wood, giving it an overall smoother surface. To lock in and knock back the graphite just a little bit, I'm going to use some Valspar Flat Acrylic Sealer. Now the front of the blaster is a brighter metal, so I'm going to use Rust-Oleum Flat Antique Nickel for this section. To make the metal look oily and weathered, I'm going to do a wash of Mars Black. After this pigment is applied, a lot of the excess can be mopped up with a damp paper towel. Now the metal on the front of this pistol has a warmer gold hue, so I'm going to combine permanent silver, iridescent russet, and iridescent gold. Because these are iridescents, they act as a glaze to the silver that's already down. But you can see having the gold and the russet mixed in, it gives this metal a warmer hue. I want these grips a little bit darker than the ones I had done on his blaster, so I'm going to start with a wash of burnt sienna. Notice I'm not applying this opaque, I'm letting some of those darker values show through. For my highlight layer, I'm going to be adding Utrecht brand Raw Sienna. This is applied using no water, and you can see how using the flat brush and the detail brush give it some nice striations. As a glaze/stain, I'm going to mix some Mars Black in with my burnt sienna. Again, I'm leaving this layer pretty transparent because I want those highlight layers to show through. Like I had mentioned before, this is a matte finish, so I'm going to add some Vallejo Gloss Varnish, and that's going to give these grips a good sheen. Some straight Mars Black can now be added to the circular details housed in the grip. Iridescent rich silver can now be brushed onto these areas, making sure not to get it onto the gloss. To give it an additional highlight and to match the screen-used version, I'm going to add some Rub and Buff. Now this is a wax-based product that I carefully put at the end of both of the barrels. Using a Q-tip, I can then apply it to the outermost highlights, basically all the areas that would really get worn by sliding this pistol in and out of a holster. And I know it's a subtle difference, but it's all these layers that go together that make this prop look believable. To paint the small detail at the top, I'm going to start by using Vallejo Gory Red. A dark red wash is then applied on top of this paint. And just like the grips, gloss is applied to help this detail stand out. So you all can see the basic steps that I took to put together Boba Fett's pistol. And just like the blaster, I have free PDF files available over on my website that you can download in case you would like to build your own. And if you are building any of my builds or supporting a small business by purchasing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD Foam.